ladies and gentlemen, for still staying with us, and we appreciate if we can all settle down as soon as possible. We just want to have our fellows here, and then we'll get started as soon as possible. Thank you so much. And I would also like to give a bit of an apology. It is the late launch. Some people have expressed their concerns to me. We apologize for that, but there is launch. It's just later than expected, but you would be all more time for our fellows, and we'll kick start to the next agenda of the list. Thank you.
There'll be some just as Tony mentioned. Our keynote address will be by Jemide, pronounced those names correctly. He is a renowned Nigerian economic and analyst, 3 decades of experience and financial service. Officer, financial that has leading voice, recently distinguished himself as one of the most respected. We're going to be together. Non-CM PLC before 59 is also boards of the foundation. In recognition of his, he was a federal had Martin work and public policy, making him a figure in Nigeria. So, welcome Nigerian less and Leo with a rousing round of applause. Welcome Mr. Bismarck Jemide Rewane. Please don't stop clapping. Yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with observing all protocols, as we say in Nigeria. The chairman of the occasion, special guest of honor, President of the Economic Indeed, and also when the discipline of economics is being turned on its head, intervention champion market. Reminds me of the English proverb and a traditional Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. The expression is ironic because interesting times, as defined by Wikipedia, are usually times of trouble. The current global economic environment is more than challenging and unorthodox. It reminds me of a very old song by the Beatles, called Let It Be. Say when I'm in the times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, singing words of wisdom, let it be. Critical and abnormally short on actual. Professor Killer went further to say that Nigeria is a story of individual success but collective tragedy. No, this discourse is auspicious because Nigeria is attempting to navigate a critical path of policy optimization with a view to leapfrogging from a poverty and debt trap to a takeoff into a breakout nation as defined by wrong. A very good piece. He is calling on the Federal Reserve not to cut rates in spite of the weak numbers on job report. And he explained it very lucidly. And he's also is a fellow of the Rockefeller Foundation. And so we just have to understand what he's saying. And this new book, which is called What Went Wrong with Capitalism, he described what he termed the circle of life and the cycle of politics, in which crisis forces reform, which generates recovery, but then brings financial constraints were for the first time in many decades are Greece, Spain, Argentina, Nigeria, South Africa, and Sri Lanka. Each of these countries had their own unique ways of achieving fiscal responsibility and restraint. Greece, for example, we know Greece was called the sick man of Europe many years ago. They were in default and they were downgraded to junk status. Greece imposed spending cuts and raised taxes to reverse its reputation of a debt defaulter, and the reform has reduced its national debt as a share of its GDP. As a matter of fact, Greece is now considered as a miracle. The two most interesting lessons of all these 6 countries, according to Rishi Sharma, are Nigeria and South Africa. Rishi Sharma observes that Nigeria, and I quote, Nigeria has also cut subsidies well and raised government revenue by increasing oil production. The country has stabilized its wobbly currency by allowing the naira to trade more freely on global markets and largely eliminating the local black markets. Rishi was most fascinated about South Africa more than any country else. South Africa has embarked on a reform styled Vulindlela, which in Swahili means clear the path. It was designed to clear blockages in rail, road, water, and electricity. The aim is to boost productivity, the key to long-term growth. Per capita income is of these nations. One difference between these countries and Nigeria is the appalling situation with power supply. Nigeria will find it impossible to optimize and sweat its assets and gross fixed investment without revolutionizing its electricity. It has one of the lowest electricity consumption per capita in the world. He goes further to say that the 6 countries, or musketeers as we call, are not the only countries doing the right things. Other nations that are reforming under duress, please note the word, other nations that are reforming under duress include Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan. One interesting nation that became its economy had fallen into disrepair and has now embarked on solid reform. Right? He believes no success or failure is permanent. When a nation is pushed to the wall, it has no option but to reform, and economic recovery follows. Our understanding is that it is better to be a developed economy that is achieving slow to average growth than to be a fast-growing, underdeveloped economy. Japan is a clear example of this nation, this kind of country. Japan is highly developed, in fact, a bit overdeveloped, but it's been achieving very tepid and slow growth. I think they grow at about 1% or below that. It has an income per head of $33,000 for the last decade. And so that's an example. But we cannot but observe what happened to the Asian tigers, who pursued a growth and development strategy simultaneously. The Asian tigers were able to build a solid development agenda while simultaneously driving an aggressive growth strategy. They combined an export-led, investment-led, and consumer-led strategy. Usually you say you can't combine all of this simultaneously, but they did. And they achieved double-digit growth for an extended period. But that was not all. And these countries include Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, who achieved double-digit growth for an extended period. They became vulnerable to exogenous shocks, especially during the Southeast Asian crisis of 1995 to 1997. This exposed those countries to capital flight, collapsed their domestic stock markets, and devastated their currencies. Everybody knows what happened between Mahatma, who was then the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and the currency tumbled and completely was because of speculative attacks by George Soros. And George Soros donated all the gains from the attack to charity. He had done the same under Mrs. Thatcher when he attacked the British pound, and the British pound tumbled completely. They sponsored a lot of their great minds to Ivy League colleges and their European counterparts. Balances, account. The Asian tiger nations learned from their past mistakes. The result was that after the 1990 crisis, we had other crises, dot-com crisis, the subprime mortgage, the global recession. The Asian countries, even during the pandemic, because they built buffers and they had very robust. Okay. So let's take a look at Nigerian quagmire and the quick wins. The problems of Nigeria have been so well documented, over-labored, and actually, to be honest with you, is very. The Nigerian economy, as I stated earlier, is a myriad of problems ranging from suboptimal growth, potential GDP higher than real GDP, declining labor, falling GDP, misaligned currency values, foreign exchange markets, high multidimensional poverty levels, exceptionally high inflation rates, and unreliable power supply. The list continues. So what do we do? The first step is to up a short list, because you cannot deal with all of these problems, because of course economics is about limited and infinite demand of needs. So what do? We have to have a short list of maybe 5 priorities. These key priority areas, or these key must have the highest linkages with the other sectors, basically borrowing growth. One sector will pull others along with it, as long as the growth of the sector that is pulling it is more than the gravitational force that will taking it down. The goals of competitiveness, scale economies, inflation reduction, and output maximization are central to this. In making comparisons of Nigeria and its, one runs the risk of comparing apples with oranges or pears. This is because Nigeria is a federation and not a unitary state. So when we talk about Ghana, South Africa, the United Kingdom, these are unitary states. They are not federal states. So Nigeria, while you want to make policy change in Nigeria, you must build political consensus by the federating units. The ease of policy change in one unit is not the same as building consensus across the federating units. The transition of Nigeria from a closed and command economy, it's okay. Okay. The transition of the Nigerian economy from a closed command economy to a mixed economy comes with consequences and pushback from growing and enlightened self-interest. Easy. Yesterday, everybody said the Pengasin, is it Pengasin or something, are having a strike because against Dangote. The government, of course, everybody knows how much the government has spent trying to revive dead refineries. And now that the refineries are working, the unions are now fighting against that. So it's interesting to see that enlightened self-interest comes both from the leadership and the followership. So we say here, we must understand that reform has its own drawbacks, but we have to. The recent reforms in Nigeria have been attractive to portfolio investors because FPI are now $15 billion, who have been able to exploit the carry trade and enjoy the stability of the naira in the forex market, or what the level of disequilibrium has reduced. They know that, and that Nigeria is closer to general dynamic equilibrium now than it was a few decades ago. So when you get closer to dynamic equilibrium, the price volatility and swings are reduced. They don't eliminate them, but they actually reduce it, and therefore the consequences of this volatility are not as severe as it was in the past. But the major problem is that increasing growth is skewed towards sectors of the economy which have limited linkages and are not job generating. So you have the cliche is non-inclusive growth and labored cliches like I said, non-inclusive and growth that is not consistent with the needs of the people. The policymakers in Nigeria, I fear to say, are obsessed with revenue growth at the expense of emphasizing an increase in investment. The time lag between when the revenue profile improves to when the increase in this alternative multiplier effect is far too long. In the meantime, people are suffering or people are hungry and angry. So I would like to address some of the many complaints analysts have why the economy continues to underperform its peers. Some have pointed out that Nigeria has the largest economy in South Africa, was the largest economy many decades, reaching $550 billion, but has now fallen to the 4th position. The policy reforms and adjustments have led to a devaluation of the currency, over 70% in the last 2 years. This is why the dollar value of the nominal GDP fell to $180 billion and only rose to $250 billion after the rebasing. It is now the 4th largest economy in Africa and the 53rd largest in the world. Our goal some time ago was to be one of the top 20 economies in the world, and they say if wishes were horses, beggars will ride. In pure economic terms, the concept of GDP was developed to measure the income of the entire economy. But neoclassical economists have come out to say that national income is not the same as national. They say that other economics with rising came up with the view that policies to correct markets can make things worse. Theory of the second best option, right? They came up with this view that policies to correct markets can make in theory, a free market is the most efficient market possible, but real economies contain measures that are inefficient and may cause harm. Distortions may be linked, and it may not be possible for a government to remove some of them. An attempt at removal may worsen the effects of other distortions, so the government should act. One of the examples that has been mentioned is that bad and there was a monopolist who was developing or producing a product and was putting the stream. And the theoretical economists say that monopolies are bad for the economy. Let's have some competition. So rather than have one supplier, they had 6 or 7 suppliers. And what happened? The 6 or 7 suppliers produced the same thing and polluted the stream, which worsened the situation. So while on the hand it was good to say, no, let's do a monopoly because he is making profits at the expense. But in trying to ensure that we diversify and create competition, we now ended up having pollution than was necessary. So, like I said, in conclusion, there are some game changers that we see and we are looking out towards. One is the Dangote refinery and petrochemical complex, which according to the IMF is expected to employment, investment and growth, as well as support regional economic integration. The overall effect of Dangote refinery is sensitive to the assumption on the table, which shows that production as a share of capacity is 90%. Domestic crude oil supply, percentage of needed crude, and the IMF is 50%. PMS domestic demand in millions of liters is 45 million liters. Jet fuel domestic demand is 3 million liters a day, and coverage of PMS diesel and fuel domestic and polypropylene demand is 100%. The crude oil price in the assumption is at $62 a barrel. Today we are at about 67 of met over the weekend and have agreed to increase their quota. The other, you can see all of those things there and the positive effect of it, especially as you can see domestic consumption versus exports in that other slide. The Highway Development and Management Initiative is another one, which means concessioning roads. I think in all there are about 19 highways that are being concessioned. It is facing serious bottlenecks from the Ministry of Works. Only one of the concessioners have been able to move to site, that is the Benin to Asaba Road. We are hoping that in the next few weeks, the Ministry of Works will stop being a bottleneck and allow that to kick off. So it's not just about asphalt and tolls. It's about allowing things happen. And I will spend a few minutes to explain what I had explained to Professor Adenikuju the other day, was that one asked, why is it that there is a pushback against concessioning roads? Because the people will bring their own money, build the roads, and toll and get it out. We found out that there are 5 interest groups that are against this concept. One are what I call the contractors who did the maintenance of these roads, who drew the money from the budget but never did anything. So that was a conduit pipe for leakage. 2 are the fact that the checkpoints in each of these roads, there are a series of checkpoints. Lagos Badagry, for example, has about 36 checkpoints between Lagos and Badagry, while from Seme to Cotonou there's no checkpoint on the other side. The checkpoints are, again, another way of extracting value from consumers. 3, the street lights. All these roads are supposed to have street lights, and none of them have the street lights. The street lights have an effect of reducing crime. So that's one. Also, we saw that there's a nexus and collaboration between law enforcement and the kidnap and ransom business. But with the tolling, you are going to find that it's almost impossible to kidnap anybody because you have only one point of entry and of exit. Everything is carried off with a central reservation concrete. So we are in a situation where it is quite good and it's obvious that it's good, but there are interest groups, enlightened self-interest, who are blocking this. The other item we had here, and there are quite a few, is the power sector forbearance. So Nigeria has spent, in 1999, Nigeria was producing 4,500 megawatts from the grid, and we have spent 30 years between that time and now, and today, 1,000 megawatts. So not only is the money lost, but the time, the opportunity cost for this past 26 years, all we've had is we've been going through the motions. And you can see what has happened in South Africa. You can see what has happened. You cannot industrialize. You cannot grow without doing something about the power sector. It's impossible to do that. I was talking now who said that the capacity of the GENCOs is 13,000, but the capacity of the transmission lines is only 5,000. Come on, concessioning those transmission lines, right? Travel by around. And if you do that, and they get 13,000 megawatts, imagine what happens between 5,000 and 13,000 megawatts if it's done within a 2-year period. Every 1,000 increase in megawatts leads to about 0.4% increase in GDP. So the multiplier effect is much more than even bringing in investments without these linkages being held. Like we said at the beginning, transmission infrastructure is dilapidated, functioning below 60% of efficiency, and I've explained that. The caution from Rishi Sharma's book, and I want to end here, remains many countries achieve early bursts of growth only to falter because they abandoned the discipline and after the first wave of success. Policy change alone cannot do it. Institutional reform has to be there. There has to be checks and balances. The Asian Tigers avoided that trap by continually upgrading their playbook, competing first on cost and reliability, then on quality and innovation. For Nigeria, the window for industrial catch-up is narrowing, but it has not closed. As the Nigerian Economic Society marks 66 years, we are reminded that progress is never accidental, and it's not by coincidence. The outcome of deliberate choices, of turning lessons into levers, and levers into leadership. The next decade can be Drucker, who says the best way to predict the future is to create it. But there's another theory that economics is no longer about forecasting and prediction. It's about judgment. Good.
Can we have someone in the crowd give mics to people that, please? A media team, if you can get to pass the mic around for questions. So I've seen one hand over there. So just 2 minutes, please. Just introduce yourself and your question straight to the point. Thank you. Is there a mic going around? Okay.
Thank you for the well thought out speech. I personally enjoyed it. To the lecture you've given us here today. So my name is Chijo Kechlemele. I'm an economist and former banker. Just to ask, you talked about consensus, and when the chair earlier, he also talked about models, economic models in relation to reality, in relation to policy, in relation to socials. Thinking what you have said, if we have concessions, the roads are working better, they are more efficient, but the cost is going to be higher. Who is going to bear this cost? The ordinary man in the streets will be charged more. And so there will be more cost, invariably, maybe more inflation. The question will be, what happens? Why won't some people say, why are we paying more? The system before was cheaper for us, therefore we are better off. Thank you.
Okay. Can I take that past the other people?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Speaker.
Let me address The concessions I'm talking about, let me give an example because the board of one is a 4-hour ride because of the bad road. When it is fixed, it will be, let us assume that the petrol price was 400 naira and you do 4 hours, and now the petrol price is 900 naira and you do 1 hour. You're better off with the concessioning and paying the toll than the other, right? 1. 2, I talked about the 5 interest groups, including kidnap and ransom, the toll gates, the unofficial toll points, right? We talked about street lighting, proper guide, and no potholes, because it means that the guys who are investing in the concession are putting their own money, and they are not charities. They will money, right? But efficient money, as against inefficient money. So when you put all of that, you now see that what Rishi Sharma is saying is that you reform, right? You change your policies, you reform the institutions, you open up your markets for competition, and you get better. You are better off. People are begging to be away from Band A because they are in Band A, but they are also suffering the penalty of Band D, right? And what happened in Pakistan was that after a while, alternative energy options became cheaper. And so when the Pakistan Electricity Board got its act together, nobody wanted electricity. So it became a dead. Understand the concept of opportunity cost and all that. And what is more, that the Benin to Asaba road is followed by the to Enugu. And so the investors, people like Guinness, who have a brewery in Benin, who are spending a fortune to get their products to the southeast, are now going to be spending little or nothing compared to what they were spending. Therefore, the logistics costs, which were almost about 19% of total cost, let us say it drops to about 10%. They can pass on that benefit to the consumers. So you may have increased productivity, reduced inflation. The nominal prices would have gone up, but the effective prices would have come down.
All right. Thank you so very much for this insightful and educative presentation you gave us today. You made mention that monopoly is bad. I agree with you wholeheartedly, but in my mind, I thought that the government monopoly, or let's say public sector monopoly, way better than private sector economy, despite the fact that there are some inefficiencies. Because when you have a private sector economy, ability to have kind of a consideration for the common man might not be. And secondly, on the issue of Dangote refinery that you spoke about, with the Nopeng or Pengasan on the strike, I thought in the first place when we visit the PIA, that's the Industry Act, is kind of concerned there, because as far as I'm concerned, Dangote refinery midstream, the transportation of the trucks are in downstream, and according to the PIE, there is a demarcation. One company cannot participate in 2 different streams. If it's going to play in midstream, he should restrict himself to midstream. Well, if it's going to be a downstream, it's going to be midstream, downstream. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me answer that question. Ask you a question yourself. State monopoly was right. The oligopoly of MTN and Airtel, which is better? You said state monopolies are good, and I've just proven to you that state monopolies are bad.
Well, yeah, we cannot compare. MTN is way better. But so, the exploitation, that's my concern.
No, what exploitation? When MTN and Airtel started, a SIM card was 35,000 naira. It was 50 naira per minute, right? At that time, when it was I think 100 and in fact per dollar. The SIM card is Zilch, right? It's free. Voice calls are so. There's no question. The efficiencies of a private sector monopoly or oligopoly, or first and foremost, I don't like monopoly in any form. And the Dangote is not a monopoly. There are modular refineries that are privately owned and is able to perform. But I want you to tell me who, the only time we have reduced the price of petrol in this country, when President Yar'Adua was here, we went from 97 naira to. After that, the only time we have received, in the last 12 months, Dangote has reduced the price of petrol 8 times. 8 times, and has increased it 3 times. So, the facts speak for themselves. In the last 12 months, there has been no, right? No, during Salah, Christmas, New Year, Easter. Normally at that time you can fares go up, but no, that's not the case. So, but because this is a question of the concept of having an efficient system, be it a oligopoly, and the best form, the pure market is pure competition, which is ideal. But again, the ideal type is a mental construct. It's not. So there's somewhere between the real and the ideal. That's where we are.
Okay. Yeah, but I enjoy your. In fact, I'm working in similar. That's my submission. Private to deficit financing and infrastructural deficit. But the problem I'm having is just the same thing you've just explained. The institution. How do you do away with this institution? These are these 5 we've mentioned. One of the problems, and the handover, because at the end of the way, at concession, there's a stage. If it is maybe 10 years or number of years, when they will now hand over, what is now the continuity, so that we still have a smooth.
No, I think the 5-year lease concession, the partners will invest their own money, and I can tell you for free that if you invest about 400 to 500 billion, the payout for this 25 years is almost 3 trillion naira. So, right? And it is very, and years, the federal government of Nigeria gets a 15% return constantly throughout the period. It's not that they're not. And if after 35 years you want to renew it, you can renew it. But it's not a Nigeria-specific type of. It's done everywhere in the world. Airports are concessioned. Seaports are concessioned. Increased investment. Guess what? The Ibadan Road, for example, I want you to check the budget to see how much is invested in maintenance. The maintenance cost becomes 0 because the concessionaire is the one that does maintenance. He gets money and he gives the people. And at the end of the day, what the problem we have with today's reform, we are taking money from aggregate consumers. We are taking money from consumers because of reverse taxes and giving it to the government. The government asks out what it's going to do, and is it possible that the government multiplier is smaller than the private sector investment multiplier? And in some cases, when the money is stranded, like we saw in Shop P, it leads to a negative multiplier, and the economy went into a recession. So it's beyond reasonable doubt that it is important the private sector-led investment strategy, right, is better off for the people. As long as you have a Marshall Plan, sure that massive income inequality. So that's why we're saying there must be some accountability from the government, because the government funds are higher.
So we've listened to the experts speak, and everybody enjoyed it. Thank you so very much. So we did this part of the program today. Like we announced earlier on, today is actually World and Fellowship. The conference starts tomorrow. This conference starts tomorrow. So we've got the end of that portion. And for this excellent presentation, sir, on behalf of the Nigerian Economic Society, I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, we activities for everybody. Okay, we move to the second part, which is the awards. Yes, the awards for the fellows and other awards that will take tour. So we will see you tomorrow. We are not part of that program. At 9. Yeah, we're going to have concurrent sessions that will start at 9, between 9 and 10:30. 9:30 prompt. 9:30 prompt. The opening ceremony begins, and that will then, take us through the day and the official beginning of the 66th annual conference of the Nigerian Economic Society. So, on behalf of the society, I want to thank you today, and we look forward to see you tomorrow. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Our planet is drowning in plastic waste,